In Washington, ghost-like objects dart across the radar screen at the CAA Traffic Control Center at National Airport for several hours, traveling more than 100 miles an hour. Air Force jet fighters spend several hours chasing the objects plotted on the radar scope.
Something else is out there.
There's something else out there, okay.
Of all the banks and braes of bonny Scotland, none holds more fascination than the murky waters of Loch Ness.
Tell me, do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I suppose there would be.
No, he seems definite. You seem
Definitely.
definite. How do you see this life and where?
Oh, I've seen a flying saucer.
Blackwater Media presents Darkfall. Real-life encounters with the paranormal and the unexplained. My experience with Dogman began with the decision that I made to build a fence around the back part of my property. I live about a half an hour north of the city of Atlanta, and the backside of my property butts right up against a wooded area. Not really the woods the way you might think, but like I said, a wooded area. Anyway, my plan was to fence in about 6,000 square feet and more or less create a backyard type environment, patio, fire pit, and one of those above ground swimming vistas. Summer was coming on, and when my nephews came to visit, I wanted the kind of backyard area that they could hang out, have fun, and be safe. The first thing I had to do was to clear about 10 yards leading up to the wood line. When fenced in, that area would be the line that separated the backyard from about 100 yards or so of trees and brush. So I called a guy that I knew named Wilson, who had done landscaping for me for a number of years. I knew that he would be able to handle the clearing and the fence installation without charging me into oblivion. On some jobs, Wilson would bring out an extra man, sometimes two, depending on the amount of work that was necessary. There were also 4 or 5 small trees that I wanted to cut down and cut up to be used as firewood. By the time the fall weather set in, I'd be all set. They arrived on the following Wednesday morning. I saw that Wilson had 3 men with him. That meant that he didn't intend for the work to take any longer than necessary. He was like that. They got started by 10 o'clock, and for the next several hours, I could hear the sound of their equipment from my office upstairs, where I drank coffee and caught up on some work of my own. They worked until 4, and I met Wilson at the back door. He told me they'd be back at it in the morning. So, day 1 went off without a hitch. The next morning, the men were back at it, and they worked for several hours. I had already cleared a space against the back outside wall of the house for firewood, and 2 of the men had begun stacking it there while Wilson and the others continued the clearing. Like the previous day, things were moving right along. Next morning, however, all that came to a screeching halt. It started with Wilson knocking on the back door and asking me to come out and look at what he'd found in the work area. And when I saw the look on his face, I knew instantly that whatever it wasn't going to be good. Now let me tell you something. What I saw when I got around to the area that Wilson and his men were clearing out was the weirdest Twilight Zone, X-Files type shit I'd ever seen in my life. There were 3 logs standing there as if they'd been propped up by someone during the night. And wedged down in the center of them was the head of a deer. From what I could see, the head didn't appear to have been cut off, but ripped or torn savagely off the body. Bits and strings of bloody flesh and entrails dangled below it. And flies buzzed and darted all around, and there was this goddamn stench that was 10 miles past description. Wilson looked at me and said, "I don't know what the fuck's going on out here. Either the white folks are trying to run you off, or somebody's trying to put some roots or some kind of hoodoo shit on you, man. Either way, we're leaving. Send a check for the 2 days when you can." Then they loaded all of their equipment onto Wilson's truck, climbed in, and pulled off. I thought about taking the head into the tree line and just burying it, but to be honest, I was scared even to touch it. I mean, who the hell would do something like that unless they were into some deep, crazy psycho shit? So there I was, no fence built, piles of firewood, and a damn severed deer head. And that's not even the crazy part. That night, I'm down in the den, going back and forth between some on-demand movies and the baseball game. I had the window open because it was a little cooler than normal, and there was a breeze rolling in. Then out of nowhere, I heard something that made me jump right up out of my chair. It was a loud, reverberating howl, and it reminded me of the howl in The Wolfman. You know that one with Benicio del Toro? There was an anger to it, a rawness that's very hard to describe. What's not hard to describe, however, is that it was absolutely horrifying. I looked out the window, and after 10 or 15 seconds, I saw what I at first thought was a person out near the deer head. And I thought, oh shit, I'm going to have to get my pistol and go out here and confront whoever the fuck this was. But then it became obvious that it was not a person. It was an animal with canine features. But that didn't make any sense because it was standing on two legs. Its fur was dark and its head was massive, like maybe 3 times the size of a large German shepherd, with a long ass snout and 2 ears pointing straight up over its head. So there I was, feeling like I was thrown into some horror movie, and I couldn't take my eyes off of that creature. Then I realized this giant wolf thing was responsible for the deer head. It was meant to scare Wilson and his men away. It was meant to stop the work. Maybe I'd inadvertently violated what the creature considered to be its territory. As all of that ran through my mind, I saw the creature pick the deer head up, turn around, and walk back into the tree line. After that, I made myself a scotch and sat back down in my chair. I don't know exactly what time I dropped off to sleep, but I woke up just after 8 the next morning to the sound of rain. I sat there for a few minutes before getting up to go to the kitchen to make some coffee. Since that time, I haven't seen or heard anything strange around my property. There's still no fence back there, and there's not going to be. No more clearing out brush, and no more cutting down trees. And most of all, no more border disputes with Dogman.